Right, okay, I think we're on. Greetings. And what I'd like to do is remind everybody that if you're watching this, the aim is to try and live stream the Atheist Experience show with a view to maybe adding to any of the calls that come in. I'll pause the episode and maybe make any comments that I think are relevant. Most of the time my aim is to try and go for the science. The idea is to try and make the science a bit more accessible to people if they don't understand it, which is a bit weird. I accept that because I'm kind of almost professing that, you know, my input to it is better than you might already have, which I don't really mean that, but it's kind of an implication. I'd like to start off like I did last week by showing you a video that I have created, and then we'll move on from that. So let me just set that up for you, and here we go. This is my introduction to this week's kind of show. Hopefully it turns up at the right point. There we go. Okay, this short clip is being created to play just before the Atheist Experience. The point that I'd like to make this week is I think that we need to have some kind of protection associated with specialists. Now, specialists are good. Specialists by definition will have specialist knowledge, that sort of thing, and as a person or a member of society, we can make use of that specialist knowledge for the betterment of all. So this is a good thing. The point that I'm going to make is best given as an example from my past. I think we should be protected, as an example, from specialist magazines. And the problem with specialist magazines and journals is that not only are they giving us information, but they also normally have an agenda. And the agenda is not an outrageous agenda. The agenda is the betterment of the area that they're trying to push, or they're trying to support, or they're trying to promote. So in other words, a magazine that is about music kit, that kind of thing, they obviously want that area of interest to flourish, because it's kind of like, good for everybody. That's the idea. The problem is when they start lying to us, or not quite telling us all the truth, and they lead us down a route that, as a scientist, I would say, does not follow the evidence. Now, an example. If any of you are slightly crazy into music systems, you will be aware of the fact that if you have a music system and you have your speakers, the speakers are connected to the music system via cables. Now, cables can be relatively cheap and cables can be crazy expensive, like hundreds of pounds per acoustic meter. Okay, let's not get into the details of what that means, but hundreds of pounds for any kind of meter is a lot of money. So I read a magazine once. I was going to explain about why the kind of expensive cabling is definitely worth it. So what they did was they started off by looking at the different types of wire and why they're good or not so good. The first one that they discussed was bell wire. Now, bell wire is very thin cable, not like wafer thin, but quite a single strand of wire with insulation around it, of course. It's the kind of wire where if you bend it, a little bit like a paper clip, it stays bent. And basically what they said was, when you've got your kit here and your speakers here, if you connect it with bell wire, the idea is the voltage that is given out from your kit will be basically transferred through the cables to your speakers. And the cables have no resistance, effectively no resistance. So all of the information and all of the energy is transferred. However, bell wire is not very good for this because bell wire doesn't have a very, very low resistance. So the idea is that when your kit generates a voltage, some of that voltage is dropped across the wire because it's got a resistance. Some of it is dropped across the speakers, and some of it is dropped across the other wire. So you don't have all of your energy transferred to your speakers, and this means that it's not so loud. So you have to maybe crank up the volume, and when you do that, it starts to get distorted and it starts to clip and doesn't sound so good. So the next cable that they discussed was multi-core copper cable, and this is the normal kind of cable that kind of flexes and it kind of stays the same shape and that kind of thing. And that was absolutely fine, and they explained that because it has a low resistance, you know, everything's hunky-dory, the voltage that's created in the kit goes basically more or less 100% to the speakers. Excellent. Then it started talking about all of the really expensive bits of cable. So they started to explain the scientific rationale for why these wires were very expensive but worth it. And suddenly all the science disappeared. Suddenly it was all about, well, the quiet moments sound darker and the louder moments are brighter, and none of the scientific arguments were used at all. Okay, well, I think we need to be protected against that kind of thing. Now, how does that link to the Atheist Experience and the callers that call in on the Atheist Experience? If any of you have watched my posts before, you will know that one of the things that irritates me is when people call in with an apparent store of knowledge, of scientific knowledge that they're going to use to explain their point or to prove or disprove God, these kind of things. And it's because they've read a popular book written by a scientist for the public, and it's normally toned down with its detail because the public haven't studied the detail, and it's very, very sort of general in its views, in its opinions, in the way that it chooses to explain things, that kind of thing. And someone reads this and feels that they are empowered with the good news of science, and they can use it to attack science, or maybe just to attack atheists or whatever it is, and that's ridiculous. Reading those kind of books is absolutely fine, but don't feel that that's the whole story, because it's so not the whole story. In order to become good at something that's scientific, it normally means you've spent decades studying it, and not just reading popular books, but you've studied it at school or university, that kind of thing. Come here. This, my friends, is my dog. She wanted to just nip in and say hello. She's a beauty. She's only 7 months old, and she's pretty heavy, and she's lovely. And she doesn't like you blowing at her. Do you? Okay. Okay, bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye. Go away. Thank you. How does this link to the ACA and the phone-ins and all that kind of thing? Okay, well, I think we need to be protected from specialists that do have some knowledge, but here's the rub. They don't have knowledge in the area they're talking about. And so what I'm going to do is play you a clip now. Now I'm just going to look to the side here because I've got multiple screens around me. And I'd like to play you a clip from the line. From the line on the 17th of June, which is a few days ago. And it's got Matt, who's been ill recently, so it's good to see him back. And it's got Jimmy Snow. And they're talking to a guy from Brazil called Antangelo. Now, Antangelo has called in an awful lot over an extended period of time. And basically, I'm not going to attack him, because that's not the point of this sort of thing. But a lot of the times, he just doesn't know what he's talking about. But here's the thing. He thinks he does. We must all know people like that. And so let's have a listen. And I'm not going to play this whole thing. And I hope that anybody that's organising the line, including Jimmy and Matt, I hope they don't take offence at the fact that I'm going to show a little bit of this to try and get over the educational point that I want to get over. So let's start that.
Someone called Otangelo, calling from Brazil, is on the air. How are you doing, Otangelo?
So let's suppose that you meet someone that wins 100 times in a row the lottery in the United States. You have two explanations. One is that the guy had big luck, and the second that something is going on, probably the guy is cheating. Which of the two answers do you think is more case adequate?
It seems to be more likely that he probably has a way of cheating, but I wouldn't know. And so why don't you go find me someone who's actually won the lottery 100 times, and then we can investigate it, because I'm not that interested in a hypothetical that you're going to try to use to spin as if we won a lottery 100 times over in order for life to begin under naturalistic processes, because that analogy that you just came up with is not analogous to what we most we think is most probable as the explanation of the origin and diversity of life.
It's actually not about the origin of life, Matt. It's actually about the fine-tuning of the universe. We know that there are over 150 fine-tuned constants which must be just right in order for life to be possible in the universe.
Atangelo.
Yeah?
So the thing is, the example you came up with is somebody winning the lottery 100 times in a row. That is a sequence of events. The physical facts about the universe, the gravitational constant, and all of those things that you want to put, that is not a sequence of events. That is a bunch of facts about this. And so your analogy is already horribly flawed. I don't even know how to fix your analogy. But if you're talking about this as the fine-tuning of the universe, you're looking at it from the standpoint of what has evolved in the universe and looking back to see, yes, this is what could have evolved. If the universe had been a little bit different in some regards, perhaps something very similar would have occurred again. If it had been more dramatically different, perhaps something dramatically different would have occurred. But we live in the sort of universe that made it possible for us to live in. That does not mean that it was designed for us. Just like if there's a hole in my driveway and I fill it up with resin, and that resin hardens and I pull it out, that resin will be exactly the shape as that hole in my driveway, but it doesn't mean that the hole was designed for this piece of resin. The resin evolved, changed to fit that mold.
Okay, but the expansion rate of the universe must be just right.
No. Otangelo. You just started with...
Okay, and I'm going to pause there. Because the aim is not to show the whole thing, of course. I'd just like to discuss briefly the point here. Matt's absolutely right. The argument here is completely and utterly flawed. You don't need 150, 160, 200 constants that are that important. To promote a very interesting book, you could try having a look at this. This is by Martin Rees. Just 6 numbers, the deep forces that shape the universe. You can get it obviously on Amazon, as you can see. I have it here. I'm just going to scan down here so that everybody that's interested can see the product details there. So you can find it on Amazon and buy it if you want. And it talks about this concept of certain numbers needed to make our universe the way it is, and if those numbers are different, how that would change the universe. The point that I'm trying to make is that Otangelo now is talking about something that he doesn't understand. He's not a physicist and he does not understand what he's talking about. He moves on in order to try and explain what he's talking about by using the concept that the expansion of the universe has to be a specific amount at a specific rate in order to create the kind of universe that we have. That's not true. This idea of the expansion of the universe comes from, and I'm not going to go into this in massive detail here because we haven't got the time. It comes from an aspect of Einstein's general theory of relativity, which is all about kind of gravity, and it introduces the concept of space-time and the expansion of the universe. And it has theoretical equations with constants in them, and you can change those constants and make the universe very different by changing those constants. It makes the properties of space-time different. But it turns out that if you want to create a universe that looks like our universe, there are only 3 options for you. And these can be boiled down to basically the density of the universe, which is a simplistic way of looking at it. The density of the universe is either quite small, is very big, or it has some critical value. If the density of the universe is very big, then what happens is when the Big Bang occurred, the universe expands. And the density is so high that the gravitational effects, if we want to call it that, slow the expansion down, stop it, and then start to contract it. The second one is the other extreme, where the density of the universe is very, very small. And when the universe is very, very small, the Big Bang happens, the universe comes into existence, space-time comes into existence, it expands, and it continues to expand forever. Now imagine that you could model this theoretically and basically dial up the density make the density a little bit bigger. Expands, continues to expand forever to infinite time. Make it a little bit bigger. Expands, starts to slow down, but continues to expand forever. Now, if you crank it up too high, it expands and you get the high density version where it stops and then it contracts. So there must be some value of the density where it expands and it kind of looks like it's going to expand forever, but actually it's slowing down enough so that it stops, but it stops at infinite time. And that's subtly different to expanding forever. And that's what we call critical density. Critical density is where the universe would have been created in the Big Bang. It expands, but it slows down and it stops expanding at infinite time. Now, we don't know whether our universe is critical or not, and we don't know whether the density of the universe is big enough or too small. We don't know yet. We're trying to work it out. We don't know yet. It has consequences for the end of the universe, for how it will ultimately end. None of the ends of the universe are consistent with having life in it. Anybody that thinks that the universe has been created and tweaked so that we can have a pleasant life is so wrong. Most of the universe is ridiculously hostile to our kind of life. So this idea is just a fabrication, an egotistic fabrication of people who don't know anything about what they're talking about. And Ontangelo is someone who is an example of somebody that has some knowledge and can use scientific words, but clearly doesn't understand all of the implications of what they're saying because they're delving into an area of science that they have no specialism in. It would be like me going on about biology, and it's not my area, so I can only talk in a general sense about certain issues in biology because I'm a physicist. Okay, well, that's my point. We need to be protected from that. And when you listen to someone who gives you spiel about something to do with biology or chemistry or physics or geology or whatever it is, always ask yourself, does this person have the specialism to be allowed to say these things? And if they don't, then you can allow them to say it, but you need to be very skeptical about the basis upon which they're saying it. And I would definitely try and look into it, research it, check it out by going to the textbooks or going to other people that do have specialist knowledge, because that's what it is to have specialist knowledge, essentially, to be able to say these things and have some sort of weight behind it. Anyway, let's finish now. Let's get to the Atheist Experience, which is just about to start. Right, okay, I'm going to stop there. I have to stop there really quickly. Forgive me. Here we go. Because even though the ACA do allow me to live stream their live stream for educational reasons, every time the music gets involved, it ends up with some copyright claim. So I end up with copyright issues. So I need to, effectively cut out the music. So we can go now to the Atheist Experience, which makes me very happy. So let me go there. And kind of helps if I do.
There's been a scheduling error, and this happened, and now we're all just going to have to deal with it. Let me be the host today. Apologies, and suckers. But luckily, Jim's here. Jim's here to keep me in check. Jim, say hi to the people.
No, there are no adults on this show.
There's been a scheduling error, and this happened, and now we're all just going to have to deal with it. So apologies in advance. I'm Canadian. It's obligatory that I apologize just before and after I do anything. So I'm sorry. And we're excited. I'm not wasting any time today. So before we get into calls, you call the number that you can see. I don't know, right down there. We've already got some calls on the line, but the lines aren't completely filled at the moment. So if you would like to talk to us about why we should believe in God and why, call in. We can't wait to hear from you and have a conversation. But before we get going with the callers that are already waiting on the line, there are some announcements for us to make. The Atheist Experience is a product of the ACA. It is a 501c3 organization that is dedicated to the promotion of positive atheism and the separation of religion and government. There are ways to support the ACA, and the ACA deserves your support. So listen up. Right below the chat, you'll notice that there's a donate now box. Donations made there mean that the ACA will get 100% of the proceed. YouTube does not take anything, and that is probably the best way to support us. You can also get awesome Atheist Experience merchandise. by going to bit.ly/AEN merch. You can get t-shirts and hoodies and mugs and stickers and a whole lot more. You can also become a member for as low as 99 cents a month. You can click the join button down below the video and become a YouTube member. And this will give you access to special chat emojis, and it'll also make you immune from messaging limits that non-members have. Like you won't go into slow mode, for example. And you can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/The Atheist Experience. We also have 3 Facebook groups. Those Facebook groups are entirely run by the fan base, and there are 4 fans, and you can interact with them. The first is the Atheist Experience fan group. It's at facebook.com/group/AXPFG. There's also the Atheist Experience private fan group. Not everybody wants to be public right now, but there's still ways to interact with other atheists in the community and ask your questions. You don't have to worry about those interactions appearing on your public feed. You can go to facebook.com/groups/AXPPFG. We also have a brand new group. It's the Atheist Experience fan group, Atheist versus Theist Debates. And that's where you can try out some of your own arguments with theists who will be there as well. And you can find that at facebook.com/groups/AXP-fan-debates. We now have a channel that houses all of the shows that the ACA has to offer in audio podcast form. So you can visit tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. There you can listen to all the latest shows, not just from the Atheist Experience, but the other great offerings we have like Talk Heathen and Truth Wanted and Secular Sexuality and the nonprofits. All of those are aggregated on that channel. So it's a one-stop shop for everything ACA that you would want to listen to on the go as well. Everybody loves a good podcast, right? And speaking of other shows, you have to make sure that you check out the other shows. There's Secular Sexuality. That's a live show on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central. Truth Wanted is on Fridays at 7 p.m. And we also have all of our Sunday shows. Talk Heathen airs at 1 p.m. Central. The Nonprofits is on right before this show at 3 p.m. Central. And finally, we need to send a big thank you out to our hardworking volunteers. This is a volunteer-run organization, so can we all just please get an in-chat round of applause for our crew? Hi, crew. Good job, guys. All of these volunteers are what make everything happen. We are just the talking heads on screen. These guys are the ones doing all of the hard work in the background all the time. I know that from experience because I'm a nightmare to deal with, and they deal with me every day. Can you imagine? So they deserve a shout-out just for that alone. Really, to be honest with you. Could you imagine, Jim, having to deal with me like as much as they do? I mean,
no, honestly, I couldn't. It would be, I mean, the audio issues alone would be pretty horrifying.
It's unfathomable, you know, on the green screen and the camera and just my general horrible attitude. But yeah, the crew is what really makes everything around here. It's a volunteer-run organization. If you want to volunteer, reach out as well. You can email the Atheist Community of Austin email addresses as well. So, Jim, how you doing today?
Oh, not too bad. Nice rainy day here in Texas, so you know.
Oh snap! Rain in the UK as well.
It's like at least you're doing what you love right now,
Yep.
which is taking calls from callers, and that's what we're going to start doing. Are you ready?
Yeah, I think so. Let's do it.
Well, too bad, we're going anyway. All right, first we're going to talk to Patrick.
Always.
Hi, Patrick. Thanks for calling the Atheist Experience. You're talking to Shannon and Jim.
Hi, how are you all doing today?
Great now that you're here.
Good.
What can we talk to you about today?
Sounds calm.
I wanted to make the distinction between like a personal God and a natural God. Like Kaku talked about this, the faith of Einstein. He said Einstein made the distinction between a personal God of like, say, Christianity and his version of a God, which was the universe, and this pantheism, and talk about how perhaps it relates to panpsychism.
Okay, so what relevance does that have? Do you believe, is that a God that you believe in?
I think that yes, I believe that the universe may be shown to have like what we would consider God attributes, but I'd like to get back to that in a minute if I can. Right now, I'd like to, just focus on that, the distinction between the two, because one is a philosophy predicated on, possible science to back it up, I believe, in pantheism, where religion just because they say so. You know, it's not predicated upon any philosophy. And with panpsychism and pantheism, there is no dogma there. There is no religion. There is no churches. There are no Bibles. It's not a dogma at all. So I would ask you all, what would the atheists have a problem with that claim? Because, see, the atheists claim, I believe,
there are no gods.
You know,
so we don't believe in gods.
You know what I mean? It's saying, so how do you come to that conclusion that for sure, that, because I've heard Matt Dillahunty say before, he said there is no science evidence of God. How can you be sure of that?
Okay, so I'm going to stop you there just because there's already a lot of content to address in what you just said.
Okay, and before that goes on, I'm just going to mention, I will comment on Albert Einstein, who normally, Einstein's view of religion is misrepresented. Einstein's religious views have been widely studied and often misunderstood. Albert Einstein stated that he believed in the God of Spinoza. He did not believe in a personal God who concerns himself with the fates. I love the way it's always a him. The fates and actions of human beings, a view which he described as naive. He clarified, however, that I am not an atheist, but prefers to call himself an agnostic. So, as far as Einstein was concerned, he was saying there is no evidence for the existence of a God. And by a personal God, we're talking about the typical kind of Abrahamic God. So the Jewish God, the Christian God, the Islamic God, it's all the same God, who's kind of looking down, whatever that means, looking down at the the actions of mankind, cares about us, cares about what we do in bed, cares about what we eat, cares about what kind of clothes we wear, that kind of thing. And he did not believe in that, and there was no evidence for that, which is the kind of issue that I think is about to be discussed on this call. His view was the idea based on the fact that somehow the universe itself is something. The reality is that when we talk about religion, most of the time we're talking about the concept of a personal God. If you want to believe that the universe is somehow an entity, a power, it has a strength, then you can do that, and it kind of gets you nowhere. It's not particularly fruitful. The concept that there is no personal God is the situation where you end up in not having an afterlife. There's no idea that someone is guiding you. There are no sins committed because you've gone against their rules. It's so not the kind of God that Christians would profess they believe. Anyway, we might come back to this in a few moments, depending on how this call goes.
So I'm going to stop you there for just 1 second, because there's already 15 things to address, and I want to kind of start from the top. So you said that atheists believe that there is no God, right? So it seems to me...
No evidence either. I got you. Bad, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's totally fine. No evidence for God or believe there is no God. Sure, fine, whatever. Fine. You say that there is evidence for a pantheistic God. So let's focus on that. So what is the evidence for a pantheistic God that should make me believe in it? Because you seem to think, or at least you're asserting from what I can tell, that there would be no reason for me not to believe in a pantheistic God, because science and philosophy lean towards it and point in that direction. And that's why you've come to that conclusion. So instead of, speculating about why an atheist is a monolith, which they aren't, do and don't believe in things, why don't you and I and Jim have a conversation about why we should be pantheists and what convinced you?
Okay, well, for example, I look up to, this may be an argument from, the appeal to an authority figure, but, Einstein, Tesla, you know, a lot of these guys were experts on the universe. Kaku said he saw wisdom in the God of Einstein.
Spinoza's
And I think what he means by that is he says the universe, you know, I don't know that he uses the term fine-tuned, but he said it's elegant, it's conducive to life, and it doesn't have to be that way because physics shows us it could just be a random collection of protons and electrons or whatever.
Okay.
You know, something to that effect. I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to purport to.
No, and clearly Patrick is not a scientist and should not be purporting to it. And it's good that he kind of throws that in as he starts talking about particles. Physicists, I think he's kind of misquoting or just saying things that are effectively not wrong. There's not enough There's not enough detail there to get a grip on that. Pantheism is the belief that reality is identical to divinity. Okay, well, fine. Well, that doesn't really get you anywhere in the sense of the personal God, which is what we're all talking about. If you wish to believe that reality is somehow a greater thing, that there is something that is linked to the process of reality that is beyond us, well, okay, you can think that if you wish to. It won't get you anywhere, though. That's the problem. There are a set of rules associated with the universe that make the universe work the way that it does. If you want to view those as somehow associated with, some sort of God, then you can do. But again, the problem is it doesn't get you anywhere, and it certainly doesn't suggest anything associated with, as we said, the personal God, the God that created the universe and then is kind of looking down on us. There's that word, down again, looking at us, etc. It just doesn't get you anywhere. Be interesting to see how this conversation goes. I'm going to go back about 5 seconds so we don't miss any.
Shows us it could just be a random collection of protons and electrons or whatever.
Okay.
You know, something to that effect. I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to purport to say that I am.
I'm going to stop you for 1 second again because you said a couple of important things there that I want to address before we get too bogged down in elaborative minutia. So you said, I asked you directly for your reasons for why you believe in God, in this particular version of God, and your reasons seem to boil down to you think Einstein and Tesla were incredibly smart, and this, from your conceptualization, is the version that they seem to believe in. Thus, it would follow that if you see them as smart, even though you don't have any reasons yourself, you would believe it too.
Well, that's some part of it. They were experts on the properties of the universe. That being their God, they were expert on their God. Einstein was an expert on his version of God.
No, he wasn't. Einstein was an expert in the areas that Einstein was an expert in on physics. When it comes to religion, Einstein was not an expert in the slightest at all. Pantheism, the view that everything is part of an all-encompassing immanent God. Okay, the reality is like the divinity, like the God, which again gets us nowhere. Don't try and overstate this. Don't try and use Einstein. The fact that you would use someone who is known to be smart in a certain area of endeavor, in this particular case, Einstein was what we would call a physicist. Einstein was really smart at physics. That does not mean that he has any greater or lesser thing to say on another subject than anybody else. We don't know that. He did not create a situation in his life where he did study such that he could talk with any greater confidence than anybody else about this concept of a God. That was not his specialism, and we should not try and do it. We should not try and believe something or not believe something because somebody says it, and they are nothing to do with the fabric of that statement. If someone has a specialism, then we should listen to them on that specialism, and that's all.
they were expert, like, on the properties of the universe. That being their God, they were expert on
Sorry,
their God.
I'm not going to keep
Einstein
jumping
was
in.
an expert on his version of God.
There's
So
physicists who are Christians. So does that mean that you should be a Christian? There's astrophysicists who are myriad faiths. Should you just find somebody who you perceive as smart and believe the faith that they believe simply because they're smart about something like cosmology or astrophysics?
Well, they showed, you know, let me get into why I believe pantheism is correct.
Perfect.
Besides Einstein and all these geniuses that, you know.
Sure.
But, so I believe there may be what we could consider God attributes.
Okay.
And some of those are congruent. These are all God guesses because we don't know what property. Only God would know what God was, right? You know, only God could be able to.
The concept that God would know is surely a personal God, which is not what he's been arguing. He's been jumping on the coattails of people like Einstein, but now moving away from it. So there's a lot of mixed ideas here from Patrick.
Only God would know what God was, right? You know, only God could be able to define him. No human could really define a God, right?
So you believe in a God that you don't know the definition of?
Unless you were God yourself, then you might be able to define yourself as God. But
so I'm going to stop you again because you said you don't know the definition of the God that you believe in. So you're saying that I don't know what God is, but there's a loose definition somewhere, and I'll hold to that.
Like, let me give you one of my guesses. Like, God would be, I believe, an attribute of God would be a conscious God. That links to pantheism, panpsychism, which many prominent scientists now espouse that might be true, that the universe could. What it says essentially is that
the problem with
this pervades the universe.
Right. The problem with assigning intelligence to Spinoza's God is that Spinoza is fairly explicit in that God has no intelligence. I mean, he doesn't have feeling, doesn't have will.
Different than Spinoza's.
Patrick, you need to shut up and listen.
My version would be different than Spinoza's. I have my own form of pantheism, but I think, like I say, there's like three main attributes that God may exhibit: without beginning or end, a conscious, and the origin of all other things in existence. Those would be.
And how would you prove any of that?
Attributes.
What does without beginning or end actually mean?
It's infinite. Like the cyclical universe model of science depicts an infinite universe. Einstein introduced that as well.
Oh God.
Well, that's one possibility that, but nobody really knows. We're still.
If you look at the first 15 minutes of this post, I actually, bizarrely, I did not know this was coming up, of course, I actually discussed this particular point. One of the three possible conclusions from Einstein's theory of general relativity is that the universe is sufficiently dense. There's other ways of classifying it, but density seems to be a nice, relatively straightforward way of doing it. The universe is sufficiently dense that it would expand, slow down, stop, contract. It would become what's called a big crunch then, and then expand, and you would get what's called an oscillating universe, which would potentially, I suppose, depending on how you want to think of it, go on forever, has always been and will always be, which people don't seem to like, the concept of a universe going on for infinity in time. Okay, I did want that to restart. 1 second.
Well, that's one possibility that, but nobody really knows. We're still looking for evidence, so that is merely a hypothesis, right?
That's why this is all debatable. I'm saying I'm more agnostic. You know, I'm unsure, but I like this pantheism idea, and I like Kaku. I see wisdom in the God of Einstein. You know, being that, you know, so much about the universe is unknown at this time. We may discover properties that may depict it, a lot like God has been described. Maybe perhaps not a personal God. It's different. It's not a God you pray to for that new bike for Christmas.
Right. But, so I guess I have a couple questions. One, what good does this God do, and what does belief in him do? And two, how do you prove he actually exists? What is your evidence that this actually exists?
Good questions.
Well, that's what I would ask the atheist. What is the proof God doesn't exist? Because that's the same stance,
No.
No, it's
I'm
not.
going to stop you there for a second, Patrick, because that's a shift on purpose. You called in to have a conversation with us about the God that you believe in, and you've already kind of given up the goat that you don't actually have a specific definition. You're kind of working based on observation and then creating this sort of like loose aggregate of what you think a God may be, because you feel as though it has these three attributes of being infinite, conscious, and I'm so sorry, I forgot the other one. Infinite and conscious. What was the third?
Let's just keep it real simple. God is the creator of everything in existence.
Okay. Okay.
The origin of everything in existence.
Okay. So we'll keep that simple. So you think that God is the origin of everything in existence, and you're basing this on what? Like what? You, Peter, not Einstein, not Tesla, not what? Like when you look at the definition of God, you've already admitted that you don't actually have a real definition of God, other than you think it maybe has three attributes, and one of those is that it was the creator of everything. So you don't obviously worship the God, it doesn't sound like. It seems as though you're attempting to look at the world around you and construct an idea of God that might fit your observations, and then sort of loosely adhering to it as a general idea. And my question to you would be, why? Like, why do you even need to do that? For what conceivable reason?
That's why I ask you the question, why would the atheist? Because it's the same thing. It's the same question in reverse you're putting on me.
No, answer my question. See, this is what I love. I love dissecting rhetorical strategies. So you may have made an error in judgment here, because what you're doing is when you're met with something that you can't actually answer or just assert over me, you're attempting to turn the tables to say, well, you can't prove God doesn't exist. Well, the problem with that is that you actually haven't even presented a definition of God. We've attempted to get you to present a definition of God, but you yourself have admitted that you don't even have one. It's potentially just a loose one. I can refute individual components of what you've said. I can tell you why I don't believe individual components of what you said, but I can't refute a God with a definition that you haven't presented. So why don't you give me your definition of God, which we've asked for a couple of times, and I will tell you why I do or don't believe in it. Because if it is a good one, if it is a solid one, if it is philosophically and scientifically accurate, based on intellectual honesty, I will be forced to adhere to it. So here's your chance, Patrick. Give me a definition of God.
I did say that. I said the origin of all other things in existence.
That's just an assertion. That's not a definition. You're just asserting that there is something that was the origin of all things in existence. That's an attribute, not a definition. And you have no proof for that. It is just an assertion. The reason I don't believe you is because I don't believe unfounded assertions.
How can you say that's not a definition? How can you say that's not a definition?
Because it needs to have other attributes other than just created the universe. So your definition of God is, so this is your distilled definition of God then, right? Is that created the universe. There is no other component to it. The only thing about it is that it created the universe. It does not need to exist within the universe, does not need to exist within time. It does not need to have any consciousness. It just needed to create the universe. That in and of itself is your definition. And I reject that because it's unfounded. There's no evidence for it and it's not required.
It's also a really, really crappy definition because, again, it doesn't go anywhere. You could say that some physical process, which we at the moment don't understand, led to the creation of our universe. So that definition would allow that physical process to be defined as God, as the God that Patrick has. I think Patrick actually probably is referring to a personal God. He just doesn't kind of want to say it. But what he's just said, as is, the God is like whatever it was that created the universe. That could be a process. And I don't think he wants to say, and a process of the process of making coffee is like a god. It's like the god of coffee. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't go anywhere. It's rubbish. On the issue that came up about Shannon Q is just absolutely bloody amazing. Absolutely love her. The issue that came up about Tesla famously being an ex-Christian. He was born he wasn't born Christian. He wasn't born anything, of course, in the sense of religion, but he was raised by his parents as a Christian, I think, and later kind of rejected it. But again, I worry too much about reading too much into Tesla, since he was also just a ridiculously strange guy that had moments of apparent geniusness, but also moments where he was slightly crazy in his ideas and his views as well. So let's get back to this, because again, can I also say the idea of Patrick, unless I've misinterpreted this, twisting it around, if I say to you, prove to me that God exists, or I make a slightly stronger statement, you haven't proven that God exists. You don't turn that around by saying, well, you haven't proven he doesn't exist. Note the he. That's switching the burden of proof. If I'm not saying, and I don't think Jim or Shannon are saying, God does not exist. What we're saying is, we believe that there is no God because there is no evidence. That's not the same thing as saying a God does not exist. You show me the proof and then I'll believe it. But the proof has to be extraordinary, because we're talking about an extraordinary claim.
There's no evidence for it, and it's not required.
There's no evidence for it. See, that's again, how do you get to no evidence? How can you tell? What would we be looking for to evidence this God you speak of?
You're the one speaking of
it. You're the one making a claim. You've got the burden of proof.
You have to know what you're looking for.
You have to know what created the universe, and you don't. You're just asserting that you do. Nobody knows what created the universe or if it was even created.
And your definition of whoever created the universe actually fits most of the Big Bang models. So, and none of those posit a God. So your God could just be the natural.
God. The ultimate definition is God equals the universe. That's the definition. If you want,
you're just defining God into existence at this point. You must recognize that, Patrick. You're just saying that God is a synonym for the universe.
Yep,
so whatever attribute the universe has, God has. It's a one-to-one correlation. God equals universe. So why do you even need to have the word God there? We already have a universe. Why do you need to relabel it God? Why do you need to say the universe is also simultaneously God and God is simultaneously the universe? Why do we need to have two names for the universe? Just say universe.
After God did. God is actually, that word came before the universe, did it not?
The word, so now you're just playing semantics based on when, like, etymology. So you're just saying when words are created is what equals truth. And I don't know the answer to that. And even if I did, even if the word God existed before the word universe existed, that would just be evidence that our conceptualization of the universe happened as we learned more about what the universe is. I don't even know if it is true. And that our conceptualizations of God in our imagination, as I see it, occurred prior to that. And that's evidence of nothing other than etymology is something. Like, there's words that exist now that didn't exist 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago.
say the universe for a fact isn't God. I want to know how you come to that claim.
Because you're just
We're not making
renaming
that
the
claim.
universe God. If you want to call the universe God, Patrick, you go right ahead. I'm not going to stop you, but it solves and proves nothing. It's just you renaming the universe God and acting like that's a mic drop. If I want to rename the universe Charlie and then ask you to prove Charlie doesn't exist, that's a me problem, not a you problem.
And we're not making the opposite claim. We're asking you to prove yours.
Like God has been described of religion, and then it's you know, if it's cyclical, it's infinite, you know, and that's one possibility. You're acting like it's not even a possibility.
No, we are simply asking you to make your case, and you're not doing it. You have the burden of proof. We're not accepting what you've offered so far. We're not making the opposite claim.
I know, that's the thing. The atheist accepts no possible God claims.
Not true.
You all have studied every religion on earth and any God claim, I'd imagine, right?
Okay, Patrick.
No.
Now you're getting frustrated, I think, because what you're putting on us is if you are not currently aware of every conceivable definition of God that or conceptualization of God that has ever existed throughout the history of humanity or is available in the universe, then you can't be an atheist because you just can't, because you have to default to believing in something you don't believe in because it hasn't been present. Like it starts to fall apart when you analyze it that way, Patrick. You're asking me to believe in something I don't because what? I haven't been exposed to it yet. I'm an atheist because I don't believe in any God claim. I've never seen a definition of God that is even remotely tenable to me. Everybody who I have a conversation with about these types of things seems to revert back to rhetorical strategies in order to not even address the things that they already say, which is something that you've done multiple times in this conversation, and no one can present a coherent definition. And if they could, I would be forced intellectually to adhere to it. So please provide me a coherent definition that isn't just A, God equals the universe, or B, it created the universe.
All right, I'm going to read 2 sentences from the Scientific American. In our standard view of things, consciousness exists only in the brains of highly evolved organisms, and hence consciousness exists only in the tiny part of the universe. Now, panpsychism, consciousness pervades the universe and is a fundamental feature
But you have no evidence of that.
And it also contradicts your quote.
Yeah, it also contradicts your quote.
It directly contradicts the quote you just read.
You have less evidence for panpsychism than you do for pantheism.
You just literally refuted yourself.
Dogmatic atheist. You will accept no possibility of any.
Oh, Patrick, I really wish that you would listen to what we're saying.
You haven't presented any evidence.
What about the Satanic Atheist Church? That's a dogma.
Okay, Patrick,
All right,
goodbye.
Time to quit.
Bye, Patrick. Have a nice
Bye-bye,
day.
Patrick.
Have a
Hope
nice
this
day.
helped.
All right, that was okay.
Oh.
Alrighty then. Well, that was.
I kind of think they spent a bit too long on Patrick there. That conversation sort of died a little bit earlier, but anyway.
I'll recover from that for a second. We're going to talk to Raphael.
Yeah.
Hi, Raphael. You're on the Atheist Experience with Shannon and Jim. What would you like to talk about today?
Hey, I'd like to talk about a very unique situation I find myself in. I am an atheist, but I am living in a place that, well, I don't want to say too much about it because it's my living situation, so I don't want to put myself out there too much.
That's understandable.
The place does have a lot of influence from Scientology, and there's a lot of woo around, but the work that they do, that there's a reason that my family can live comfortably, is work with neurology. And Shannon, I know that you have an excellent background in this, so I was hoping to talk to you about this too. The work that they do, I've seen excellent work, but I don't know how to deal with them in the woo while dealing with the neurological work that they do. I guess if you want to ask me any questions, I'll be happy to elaborate.
Wow, is this Scientology?
So my question would be, do you feel as though they're bringing religion into the work they do with patients in a detrimental way? Or is it an uncomfortable work environment for you?
There is that element that of Scientology that is anti pharmaceutical and
Yes.
anti therapy in the psychotherapy realm, and there's also anti-vax, and especially in today's day and age, the anti-vax thing.
Scientologists don't believe in. I think they don't believe in mental health. They don't believe in treatment for mental health. They certainly don't believe in using drugs for psychotherapy. Scientology is an interesting one, because if you look up the sort of tenets of Scientology, they are absolutely, utterly, and totally ridiculous, and you would find it very difficult to actually get your head around how anybody would believe anything to do with Scientology. Now, there was an interview with Ricky Gervais, where he was asked the question by a theist about, how can you not believe in God and this sort of thing. And Ricky Gervais basically said, as one of his arguments, imagine that we kind of lost all our knowledge and we had to recreate everything again. All of our basic knowledge on science and engineering and just everything. We just kind of forgot everything. In a few thousand years' time, we would have religion back. So we lost knowledge of religion as well. In a few thousand years, we would have religion back. But religion would look almost certainly very different to the religions that we have now. And the evidence for that, in part, would be Scientology. Scientology is a fairly recent religion. It's not very old, and it's absolutely ridiculous. It's based on sort of pseudo-science fiction, created by a science fiction writer, and it bears no resemblance to Christianity, to Islam. So if you leave people up to their own devices, eventually society seems to come up with the idea of religion, and they can be absolutely ridiculous religions. However, Gervais also said, but if you waited a few thousand years and you looked at the state of play for science, science would be exactly the same way as it is now, because the same experiments would be done with the same conclusions or the same results and the same evaluations and conclusions. So the scientific method would still continue to work, and it would get us back to where we left off, whereas religion would not. And I think that's almost certainly true. And as I said, Scientology is a good example of how craziness can come from people that are basically trying to manipulate people. It is my personal belief, only my personal belief, that religions in general are based around in part, the oppression of women. That it is a male-dominated in almost all cases, and that women are subservient and effectively second-class citizens, which is an absolute outrage. I'd like to move on, but I would also like to say, when you think about cancel culture at the moment, and all the things that are being done to cancel people, comments that they've made maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago on some social media network, and somebody brings it up and said, well, when you were a teenager you said this, and now that you're 20 or 30, we're going to hold you to that and try to basically destroy your life, and anybody that does anything like that just gets crucified. Can you imagine a book like the Bible being written now? A book that basically endorses slavery, endorses rape, endorses the fact that women are second-class citizens, that are property, they are chattel, endorses genocide, It was just absolutely incredible. A book like that would not be written now. And if it was written now, the Twitter mob would go absolutely crazy about it. Just publishers would be under threat because of publishing such a book. Absolutely stunning that no one's trying to deal with the Bible, are they?
And especially in today's day and age, the anti-vax thing had me, well, a little more than concerned. Now I can tell you right now, my entire family is vaccinated. We went ahead and did that, but I almost felt like we had to do it on the fly because we would have gotten, we would have gotten a bit of retaliation or pushback on that. And so, just dealing with that whole situation, dealing with that whole, and they come from a stance of, well, we do good work. We do work that is saving, all these families, and it deals with brain injury, and neurologically speaking, they are doing things that are helping the experience of kids, and I've seen it. I've seen the work that they do. So it's hard to turn to them and say, oh, it's all woo,
Yeah, it's difficult to have conversations with people who are heavily indoctrinated, especially when they're surrounded by a community of reinforcement. If they were doing anything that entered into their line of work that was a detriment, I would just say report them, especially when they're in the medical field. Just report them. Don't think about it. Just do it. You can do it anonymously. Report them to the board. The end. If you don't see that there's that overlap, and it's more so that you're just concerned about them and the group, I unfortunately don't think that you're going to be able to fix Scientologists or deconvert every Scientologist. If there's people that are close to you where this is an issue, there's communication strategies that you can utilize.
Yeah, this is a very, very close-knit group. I mean, when I say it's my living situation, we live on the facility. So we live within that. And so like if I do have pushback, in the wrong way, which I've seen.
So you are an active member right now?
My wife is, and with her position, we're given a house. And so we're given quite a bit. We're given a place to live, and we're given, we don't have to pay for utilities and all that fun stuff. Granted, she's not being paid very much, but, I have a salary and I have work outside of the school, the place that's doing all this work. So I'm trying to save up enough, but, having a whole family, it's not going to happen that fast. So I'm still walking on eggshells a lot when I'm dealing with people who are around me,
I'm really sorry. That must be incredibly frustrating being literally in the midst of that.
Yeah, but I got to say, it is interesting having certain conversations. It's there are times when I see that I make sure that I'm not talking about it from an atheist perspective, but I am talking about it in terms of critical thinking and, trying to look at things in terms of, I guess, pragmaticism and try to take out the dogma. You know what I mean? I guess having those conversations with them has gotten me a little bit further here and there. It has gotten me to the point where, like, okay, if I go to the pharmacy and fill a prescription, I'm not going to get grief for it. You know what I mean? But
that's
right there.
Yeah, I think, you're kind of in a bad situation because it sounds like your livelihood is tied to this, right? And so there's things you can do and things that you don't want to do. And that could prove to be somewhat touchy. But honestly, I think that, if they're actively against using the proper medication, it sounds like they're in violation of some sort of standard, and that as Shannon said, that should be
things. They do things carefully. Like, for instance, they won't have somebody, just cold turkey off of an anti-seizure med. They'll go through the proper protocol of detoxing them, or like.
But if they're unwilling to prescribe the medication to begin with, that seems to me to be problematic.
And to me, it's very curious that there's Scientologists, especially an abundance of them, who are neurologists, since they literally built a museum specifically to spread propaganda about the evils of psychiatry and psychology. And neurology and most brain science falls kind of under that umbrella tangentially. So them becoming neurologists.
I see the cognitive dissonance every day. I mean, I totally,
blows my mind.
I'm saying that. Yeah. And so, I mean, how do I deal with that cognitive dissonance? How do I deal with, and how do I not fall into some of the woo myself? I mean, there's times when, they're talking about something with such authority, and it's hard to critically think sometimes about, is this woo or is this real?
Especially when you're surrounded. Source methodology, like, keep yourself grounded. I know it's probably difficult to get yourself out by the sounds of it, especially if your wife is so deeply entrenched. I don't know what is best for you, nor do I presume to attempt to guess what is best for you. If you feel like you need to be there, at least for the interim, I would suggest continuing to ground yourself via source methodology and educating yourself and looking into claims when they make them. If you don't feel as though you have the safe ability to counter them and still be okay, at least at the very least, and you don't see them as actively harming anybody, which is important.
Yeah, I'm trying also, not just for myself, but I have 3 kids, so I want to make sure that they don't get sucked into this too. So that's one of the things that I'm working hard to do. I'm trying to help them keep a real skeptical mind on this stuff. So I just don't know if you might have some.
Have you looked at street epistemology?
Well,
I have.
Yeah, dangerous, very dangerous.
I'm not that good yet.
Right.
I get what he does, and it's great, but I can't keep myself.
Right. So you when you say he, you're talking about Anthony Magnabosco?
I would imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Also look at a YouTube channel called Let's Chat. I forget the gentleman's name, but he actually goes further afield into other topics with his street epistemology, and you may find that more helpful as well as a conversational skill. I have seen him talk about what movie is better, which Star Wars movie is better, and things like that, using street epistemology techniques. So you may find him a little bit that view may be more helpful, because he's not nearly as direct, and he's got a very different style than Anthony Magnabosco. So maybe look at that Let's Chat. Let's Chat.
Let's Chat. Okay, great. I'll look that up. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you calling. We do have other callers on the line. Raphael, I don't mean to let you go. I always feel bad when people are calling about important personal issues, but I feel like we've reached a natural stop. And call us back and update us at some point in time as things progress.
I will.
Okay, thank you.
Good luck.
Stay safe and have a good weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Well, that stuff always breaks my
That is
heart.
hard work.
Yeah.
When people are so entrenched in a cult like that, it's really hard because it's so.
You know what? We forgot to mention RFR might have some resources too. So.
Oh yes, very good. Always
Recovering
yes.
from religion.
Recovering from religion is a great place to go. I link them in every video description I've ever had on my channel, because there's never a context when I think that they shouldn't be available. All right, let's talk to Yelmer.
All right.
Oh shoot, I think I dropped the call by accident. There we go. All right. I don't know who put me in charge here. Hi Yelmer. I think I got you in. Did I do it?
Hi Shannon. Hi Jim.
Who did
Hey,
it?
all right.
I almost hung up on you by
Shannon clicked the right
accident.
button.
I tried not to be in
Fluke.
charge. No one wants
Bye,
to. What would
Fluke.
you like to talk about today?
Yes. Well, the thing I want to talk about is something I called in about 3 times before and just got to hang up within 30 seconds or so.
All right. Well, it's been fun. We'll talk to you later. Go ahead.
No, but I heard Matt say 3 weeks ago that it's not his goal to hang up on people. And it's really a genuine argument that I want to make, so I hope
Okay.
talk about it a little bit longer than 30 seconds this time.
Sure. Go for it.
Go for it.
So, well, the thing is, if you say that it's either true that God exists or it's not true that God exists, is, I think, a false dichotomy.
Oh,
Okay.
And the reason is that it might be ontologically indeterminable. And I'm talking ontology here, not epistemology.
Mm-hmm.
So when something is ontologically indeterminable, the indeterminability is not because of some limitation on our side, but is an intrinsic property of the thing you're trying to determine. And
but he can't prove that, and he doesn't know that, and it's assertion. It's an assertion that I mean, he's going to refer to the concept of the God then as not being knowable, and that is some fundamental property. However, we don't accept that because science shows us that if there's a natural phenomena that we can study, then we can, given enough time and effort, at least start to make some progress to understanding it. It is not a property of anything that we have come across that we actually have evidence for that it is unknowable.
a good
Can I
example.
stop you for a sec to make sure that I understand? I'm not a philosopher by any stretch of the imagination, so I may stop you just to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying. And what I'm hearing is that it may be just definitively indeterminate because things are either true or false, right? A statement is either true or false. Are you saying that it's could be indeterminable because I could say, flubber exists or flubber doesn't exist, but no, in that instance, it doesn't exist. I'm just making it up. So yeah, no, I don't get what you mean by ontologically indeterminable.
So a very good example would be a paradox.
Okay.
A paradox, a two-sided card paradox, for instance, where on one side of the card it says that what's written on the other side is true, and then when you turn the card, it says that what's written on the other side is not true.
Mm-hmm.
So
How is that analogous to a God existing or not existing, though?
yes, so true and not true would become useless in that circumstance. So I wonder, how would you exclude that the true nature of reality is paradoxical?
So I feel as though you just smuggled in true nature of reality as synonymous with God.
No. If we are talking about God, we are just speculating. If we are talking about the existence of God, we are speculating about the true nature of reality. Is it divine or is it not divine?
I feel like so that might be an assertion because I know that there's definitely people who, like I have many polytheistic friends, for example, that they don't necessarily, all of them for sure, see God as the true nature of reality because there's multiple gods, each with their own contribution. So they wouldn't see God as synonymous in a monotheistic sense with the true nature of reality. So I think it is kind of presupposing monotheism. It's also presupposing that any definition of God is a synonym for the true nature of reality, and then subsequently presupposing that God is in fact the true nature of reality, but then asserting that given all of those is the case, that it could still be paradoxical.
Well, I'm not sure if I got what you said there, but my only question is, how are you going to exclude that it's paradoxical?
Again, I think what he's trying to do is allow for something that is not a binary situation. It's like there is a God or there isn't a God. He's trying to introduce a third option, which is that there may be a God that cannot be defined in a way that allows you to say that it exists or does not exist. It is indeterminable. The prompt and therefore in some way, as he's saying, a paradox. However, we have no evidence for that, and there isn't a situation that we study in science that is like that. So he's creating a situation that actually doesn't exist, unless he can give us some other example that does exist like that.
Well, I don't even know what you mean by God, so it's difficult for me to make an exclusionary criteria where I'm not sure what you mean by God.
Well, let's simply say that God's existence is paradoxical.
Okay, sure. You say God's existence is paradoxical, then you couldn't make a determination given that hypothetical. It's a paradox, so it wouldn't be true or false. But I don't know what the point is, though. Like, is this just like an intellectual exercise?
Well, the point is that the dichotomy that you are very often using in your Atheist Experience show, that it necessarily has to be mutually exclusive.
I think this is pedantry to a certain degree.
Yeah, I also think that you're kind of missing that. While it is true that either a God exists or a God does not exist, right? You don't have to accept either of those as true. You can take the neutral position, which is the position that I take, either of those. So it's not a false dichotomy to say that, but either position would need to be proven true. So I'm still not sure how you get a false dichotomy out of that when you can take the neutral position, right?
No. If you say that it's either true or not true that God exists, and let's suppose it is paradoxical, then true and not true are just useless, and it is a third option to being true or not true.
So how do we have productive dialogues about this, though? So we're here to talk about it, right? We're here to talk about what we believe and what we don't believe, and I'm big on dialogue. So how would you, Yelmer, suggest that we go about carrying on conversations about whether or not we believe in God or think God claims are true or false, while simultaneously holding your position that they are always neither because God is potentially paradoxical? How do we have substantive conversations about beliefs while holding your position?
Well, that's a whole other discussion. The point
this is what we do here. This is what we do here. It's not a whole other discussion. It's absolutely relevant to what we do here. So, which is why I think this might be a little bit of pedantry, right? It seems as though you're saying, hey, the way that you hold these discussions needs to incorporate this. It needs to incorporate this thing that I'm saying about the idea of God potentially also being paradoxical, which means that you can't say that God propositions are either true or false because it's not a dichotomy, because I'm saying that this is a potential third option.
False, not true.
I beg your pardon?
Well, both true and not true is also an option. If it's paradoxical,
okay, great,
but
sure.
you need to demonstrate that, right?
And also, I'm willing to accept everything that you said and just say, sure, Yelmer, absolutely fine. But how do I go about carrying on conversations here going forward about what people believe and why they believe it, while without utilizing the language that God claims that people have proposed to me, which is generally what people are talking about, which is why I'm pretty strict on definitions about what God is or isn't, because I'm talking about what people currently believe and what they think that I should believe. And usually that's wrapped around some sort of cognitive scaffolding that has some attributes which I either will or will not believe in. So I can see how this, in this context, is a bit of pedantry, where you're maybe calling us to go, aha, you can't even have these conversations. Otherwise, what's the point? Like, you called us to tell us this because...
Well, there's all kinds of ways that you can talk about God and atheism, but the thing that I'm calling in for is about an argument that the Atheist Experience is using over and over again for years and years.
What?
And that's the dichotomy that either God exists, or either it's true that God exists, or it's not true that God exists. And what I just heard you say, I think, was that you would agree that it might be, that you cannot exclude that it could be paradoxical.
No, I don't have any evidence to assume that it is, though. It's the same reason I can't exclude that God doesn't exist at all, right? So I don't assert like that there's no conceivable way God can exist at all, right? That's just not an assertion that I have. I think the reason that people get frustrated when you call in is because you seem to be really stuck on the fact that that people are having conversations about whether God does or doesn't exist, and you really want people to to not have that conversation about whether God does or doesn't exist, but to instead have conversation about God, whether God is or isn't a paradox. And I'm still not quite there, because if God is paradoxical, to a certain degree, wouldn't he have to exist? I mean, I guess that I'm not a philosopher, but I can't quite wrap my head around that. And I also don't see why it's useful. I don't see what it gets to, other than what? Like, I don't get the point.
Well, did I hear you say that you cannot exclude that it's paradoxical? Is that correct? Did you say that?
I can't exclude that God doesn't exist either. I can't exclude that he's made of candy floss and lives in the sky above Mars, and that, like, there's a billion things that are probably very likely untrue that I can't exclude. Some of them are even logically impossible. I can't just exclude them because they're logically impossible, because there could be a paradoxical scenario where the laws of logic just don't even matter. So that, like, you're asking us to try to have conversations with, while considering absurdities as a possibility. And I don't see that as fruitful, beneficial, necessary, required, or beneficial, I guess. I probably already said that once. I'll say it again because it's that important. I don't know, Jim, do you have anything else to say? And then I think we have to move on. There's a bunch in the queue.
Yeah, and we address claims being made. So as soon as somebody makes a claim that God is paradoxical, we're going to ask the same question we ask everybody else who makes a claim on this show: what's your evidence? So if you think God could be paradoxical, present your evidence that he is.
Let me be clear. I didn't make a claim. I asked you how you would exclude it. You are the one to make a claim that is necessarily mutually exclusive. God's existence is necessarily mutually exclusive. And if you're not making that claim, then it is a false dichotomy what you're presenting to people with.
I'm not making that claim. I'm simply saying I don't accept either as true.
Accepting that anything is within the realm. Sorry. Accepting that anything is within the realm of possibility is like that. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying I can't absolutely exclude it, and you're making that synonymous with obviously it's the case, and this is frustrating because I still to this day, like to this moment right now, and you've apparently called 4 times at this point, don't see the point to this.
Well, the point is that you are.
I am what?
Show is now 16 years old, and most conversations with any theist start out with the claim that with the dichotomy that God either exists or doesn't.
Their God, yeah, absolutely, because their God to them exists. We're having conversations with people, Yelmer, who believe that God exists and think that they have definitions of God, so that the claims that they propose to us, we believe that they are either true or false because they are making claims. We are not talking to people who are calling in going, hey, do you think it's possible at all that, God could be paradoxical? What do you guys think about that? Except for you, kind of, but you're not really calling to say, hey, to talk about the concept of whether or not God can be paradoxical. You're calling to use it as a cudgel because you want to say that we're not having productive dialogues, while also asserting that we need to do something that doesn't make dialogue productive when people are making claims. The next time somebody makes a God claim, I'm not going to go, well, that's false, except it could be paradoxical, because no, it probably isn't paradoxical because they're making a very specific claim that I can address the components of, which is what we do here.
It seems to me that you're starting almost every dialogue with a false dichotomy.
We're starting with people who are making claims, Yelmer. So it's not a false dichotomy. Their claims are either true or false.
Well, you're making a claim, and the claim
is... for the love of God, Yelmer. I can see why people hang up on you, because this is not productive. I am going to graciously say goodbye to you and move on. I appreciate your conversation. You definitely made it more than 30 seconds. We've explored it. I disagree with you thinking it is something that we should adopt, or your understanding of what we do here. And I hope you have a delightful rest of your evening. Thank you. And I'm hoping that you felt as though you had the opportunity to clarify so we don't have to talk about it again. Have a lovely evening. Okay, well, we let Yelmer talk for more than 30 seconds. We did it. Okay.
Yeah, the whole 13 minutes, and not only did he fail to convince me that his point was correct, he failed to convince me that I should care.
Right, like to what end?
Right.
You're starting every conversation with a false dichotomy. No, we're not, because the people that we're talking to
yeah.
are making a claim about what they believe.
Right. It's
That's
either true
not
that my
a
glasses
paradox.
are on. Yeah, my glasses are either on my face or they're not. Where's the paradox?
He's talking about our generalized belief structures more so than he's talking about the conversations that we have. What we do here is have conversations. He's saying basically you as an atheist is a generalized belief structure. And then that gets into the definition of atheism. And if he wants to have to talk to any atheist about that, what they believe, sure, that might be productive. If you can show that God's even a paradox, which you would also have to demonstrate. Yet, let's take another call.
Yeah.
Let's talk to David. Hello, David. You're talking to Shana and Jim. What would you like to talk about today?
Hey, Shannon and Jim.
Hi.
I just sort of wanted to kind of rehash something you guys were talking about, but this is sort of something that I talk about all the time when I talk about cosmology.
Cool.
Oh, gosh.
I sort of have my own...
Okay, so just in case, it's just a pretty straightforward comment just about the word cosmology. If anybody doesn't know what the word cosmology is, it's a reference to an area of scientific research that looks at the birth, the life, and the death of the universe, of the whole thing.
Cosmology.
Cool.
I sort of have my own cosmology.
What does that mean?
It's called the cosmology of David.
Oh, sugar. Okay, so I instantly think this is a waste of time, but it might not be. That's just the feeling that I'm getting now, and no doubt we will see what that means in a moment.
Neat.
It's called the cosmology of David.
Okay. All right. Davidism.
But I'm not... Yeah.
Okay.
Davidian cosmology.
You don't mention Davidian in Texas, because we've already had a brush with the branch Davidians, so let's stay away from that.
Eep. All right.
That's what somebody labeled it. So I don't want to give you my cosmology right now, because I've tried to give it a couple times, and Jim shut me down one time, said I wasn't qualified, and Matt shut me down. I've been shut down by everybody. So
My turn.
Turn to different subject.
All right, what would you like to talk about, David?
Yeah,
Let's go.
so, well, he was talking about pantheism, and so I just wanted to say that he was approaching it from a totally different area, but my understanding of the Big Bang Theory...
I think there's some bandwidth
is
issues
that
here,
it
by the
sort of
way, I'm sorry.
necessitates pantheism.
Why?
Which Big Bang Theory are you talking about? There's 13 of them that all fit that definition for lay people.
Let's sit back.
Okay, well, I don't...
Jim show now.
The concept I understand of the Big Bang Theory is when it talks about expansion of the cosmos.
Okay.
That it started at a single, very infinitesimal point of massive energy and then somehow expanded from there and is still expanding.
That's one of the hypotheses. Yes, it fit the general definition. Yes. So what?
Okay, that's the only one I know.
Okay. And how does that prove pantheism?
On that.
Yeah, how does that prove pantheism?
Okay, I'm just saying that if you follow that model, that sort of necessitates pantheism.
No, it doesn't.
How does that necessitate any God claim? How does that necessitate a God?
Well, it necessitates pantheism. I said I didn't say God. So,
why?
Well, what's your definition of pantheism then?
Type of that the cosmos has creative abilities. That's what I'm looking at.
So right. So your definition of pantheism is that the cosmos has creative capability.
Right. Well, that's one aspect of it. I'm sure I can think of other things, but.
So when you say creative capability, what precisely do you mean by creative?
Well, the Big Bang model creates space where there is no space.
Okay, but volcanoes create land where there is no land if they're in the ocean, right? Is that the type of creative do you mean, or do you mean creative as in someone paints a painting? Because those are two different types of creation.
You know, a volcano doesn't create anything. It just rearranges stuff.
That was kind of my point.
I'm talking about creating something out of nothing.
Well, a volcano will create land where there is no land if it's in the middle of the ocean. The Hawaiian Islands and most of the South Pacific Islands are kind of proof of that. So, you know, it does create islands in the middle of the ocean. So there is that type of creation that is purely natural and it is not directed. And then you have the type of creation of, say, a painter painting a painting that is a directed creation, right? So which type of creation, when you say that, do you mean?
No, I'm not talking about either of those, because you're creating something out of something there. But I'm talking about, in the Big Bang Theory, it's saying that space is created out of nothing.
No,
it's not saying that.
Well, I don't know of a model. I don't know of a single model that actually talks about that. I've never heard any cosmologists talk about creating something out of nothing. The only people I do hear talking about that are generally theists. So they have other ways of saying that the universe is created, but out of nothing is not one of them.
The Big Bang Theory does not say that the universe was created out of nothing. It says that there was nothing and then the universe came into existence. And we have a big issue with what the word nothing means. Nothing does not mean empty space. There is this idea that most people that think about this incorrectly think, which is that the Big Bang was the moment of creation, but basically you have to imagine you have infinite empty space with nothing in it, and then at a certain moment, wham, the Big Bang occurred at some point that maybe you could never pick where it was going to be, some random point, and all of this kind of energy appeared from there. That is not what the Big Bang model actually suggests or states. The Big Bang model has space created at the same time. Before the Big Bang, there was nothing, no space, no matter, no energy, nothing. And at the moment of the Big Bang, space and time and energy came into existence. But the Big Bang does not state how that happened. It does not state that it came from nothing. Because it makes no comment about where that energy came from, because we don't know. And certainly at this moment in time, because we don't know that, then the moment of the Big Bang itself does not obey the laws that we have now, in the sense that we believe, for example, that you cannot create or destroy energy, only convert it from one form to another. Well, if at one point there was nothing, if you imagine before the Big Bang, even though that's a weird thing to say, because before references a time issue and there was no time before the Big Bang, but let's just kind of go with this for a second. If you imagine that there was nothing and then there was something, then clearly that suggests that energy is being created at that moment in time, at that point in time, and we don't think that can happen. Scientists do not state what it came from. So the idea that it came from nothing, one, may or may not be true. Two, we don't know whether that's true. Okay.
I've heard generally theists. So they have other ways of saying that the universe is created, but out of nothing is not one of them that I have heard.
Well, originally there was supposedly an infinitesimal point of massive energy, right?
That is something.
Yeah, but that's the proposition of the Big Bang, right?
Yes, that is one of them, yes. That there was a singularity, and that singularity expanded rapidly, that we call the Big Bang, and that created the universe. However, the singularity is not nothing. It is, in fact, something.
Yes, but I'm just talking about that infinitesimal point of massive energy in the center of whatever.
Okay.
That thing had to, I mean, they're saying that maybe gravity or something was containing it within that, but I don't know what they're saying about how much space was there. But
Well, it's a singularity. So the concept of space and time don't really exist at that point, and we don't really understand it ourselves. And I don't know anybody who understands it because our knowledge stops at about Planck time. So very, very short period of time we can go back, but we don't understand any of the physics behind what happens before that. So we don't know. That's why there are 13 different versions of it, or 16, or wherever the number is.
Okay, but I only know of this one.
Well, there are 13 to 16 different versions of the Big Bang Theory, right? There's a lot of different ways it could go, and we just don't know.
Okay, well, mine's just the kindergarten version.
Wait. This is fascinating to me. I love listening to you guys talk about the beginning of the universe. But David, you have to recognize that you're calling in to tell us that you think the Big Bang Theory entails pantheism or I can't remember which, something entails a god of some sort, but this is based on your kindergarten version understanding of it. So are we?
Well, this is the only one I know. So he said.
So why should we be convinced? You've just admitted that you have a rudimentary understanding of the concept, but also asserted that the concept entails something. So
make this an argument from authority.
Yeah.
I'm not smart enough. I'm not smart enough to.
No, David, I don't mean to imply that, but I also want you to recognize that, like, if you're going to call in and say, hey, the Big Bang Theory entails this belief, then, or if you're, especially if you're going to believe that's the case, you should have a foundation that's based on more than, I mean, I don't know, I heard about it, and this is my understanding of it, right?
Hiya, Jenny.
Like, I want better for you.
This is the one I've been learning since I was 18, and I'm 58. So.
Right, and it's the one that I learned in school as well, and it turns out that it's much more complicated than that. But I don't see how you get from the Big Bang is to a god, right? That's kind of the problem. Or how do you get to pantheism from there?
This is one of the things that I was referring to before the Atheist Experience started. I was saying that we needed to be protected from specialists who decide that their specialism allows them to then start talking about something that they have no specialism in. And the example that I gave, one of the examples, I gave two examples. One of the examples that I gave was if a biologist, for example, who has an expertise in biology, starts talking to people about physics. Okay, well, the biologist has no specialism in physics. So although they are in a stronger position than a sort of a non-scientist to be able to use and understand the use of the words that they use, the terms that they use, the definitions that they use, they are not a physicist. So they should be very careful about making too many pronouncements about physics because they don't have a specialism in it. Now, David is calling in here, and clearly, with respect to David, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And the problem then is, now this is not quite the same issue. This is an issue that I mentioned before the program started, but it's also something I mentioned last week. Having read the big boys book of cosmology, written by a scientist or a journalist for general public consumption, that does not mean that you are now an expert on cosmology. It does not mean that you're in a position where you should talk to the world about the good news of your science, which is exactly what David is doing, and it just comes over as unbelievable and slightly idiotic, which is, and I'm not calling him an idiot, but what I mean is, because you don't have a specialism in it, you're on just really unsolid ground, because almost everything that you say is going to be subject to such a large amount of uncertainty and disbelief that it's kind of almost pointless. And this feels like I'm saying that a lot of people should not have these kind of conversations. And in a way, it's kind of what I am saying. If you're going to have the conversation where you're going to profess something based on a scientific idea that you have no understanding of, it's obviously not going to be a good conversation. And the danger for people then is they come over as seeming like an idiot, which they're not, but they'll come over that way. And that's not good for them either.
That's kind of the problem. Or how do you get to pantheism from there?
Well, I was just saying it necessitates pantheism minimum, so you can't really be an atheist.
That's your claim. What's your evidence?
Why?
That's your claim. What's the evidence? Why?
Jenny, if you don't know, that's Georgie.
Because, I mean, you could be an atheist and believe in Satanism, not believe in the Big Bang, but if you believe in the Big Bang,
whoa, I want that again.
Pantheism minimum, so you can't really be an atheist.
That's your claim. What's your evidence?
Why?
That's your claim. What's the evidence? Why?
I know, I'm sorry. What's the claim?
But I don't see how you get from the Big Bang is to a God, right? That's kind of the problem. Or how do you get to pantheism from there?
Well, I was just saying it necessitates pantheism minimum, so you can't really be an atheist.
That's your claim. What's your evidence?
Why?
That's your claim. What's the evidence? Why?
Because I mean, you could be an atheist and believe in Satanism, not believe in the Big Bang, but if you believe in the Big Bang, you are necessarily already a pantheist, because in order for that finite point of power to expand, right?
More misuse of science.
It necessarily has to create space.
But we don't know how that happens. So are you literally saying I don't know, therefore pantheism?
I'm saying that violates the laws of physics. What I'm saying is
we don't know what the laws of physics are. We don't know what the laws of physics are before Planck time. So how can you make that claim?
Here we go. See, this is now we're back to it again, and David is just making an idiot of himself, because he's now making a statement, a pronouncement about the laws of physics at zero time. And Jim is absolutely right. We don't know what the laws of physics are at zero time. So we cannot, and physics does not make a statement about what the laws of physics are at zero time. So unfortunately, this is a perfect example of somebody who's picked up a bit of information, doesn't really understand it, has not put in decades of work trying to understand this, so has no basic understanding at all, but he's arguing about it, and he's just going to come over as an idiot, I'm afraid.
We don't know what the laws.
I think if I was to try and put some rationale on this, to try and help David here, it is really important when we talk about anything that we understand our limitations and we don't try to overstep the boundaries of those limitations, because when you do that, it tends to go all wrong.
We don't know what the laws of physics are. We don't know what the laws of physics are before Planck time.
These
so how
two,
can you make
Jim
that claim?
and Shannon are a fantastic pair.
Well, if that little point of finite mass of power was in, say, solid material.
Oh gosh!
Right?
We don't know what it was.
It was like.
You're making claims
that I don't know of any cosmologist who would substantiate it. We don't know what happened. That's the whole point.
Well, all I'm saying, it just violates the laws. It involves metaphysics.
Minimum.
No. How can it involve metaphysics if we don't even know what the physics are? How can it involve metaphysics?
David is digging a hole.
Violating the laws of.
You know, there's a phrase in the UK: when you're in a hole, stop digging.
It involves metaphysics.
Because you're violating the laws of physics.
What laws are we violating when we don't know how the laws of physics work in the singularity or before Planck time?
Well, you're violating the modern laws of physics.
There are the laws of physics. We just don't understand them beyond a certain point at certain high enough energy levels.
Jim, you need to know the retro laws of physics.
So,
right, and yeah.
So you guys will admit then that you don't know what the physics could have been infinitely fast light in the beginning. You have no idea. But
do you think that it's a mic drop that we don't know what physics was like billions and billions and billions of years ago at the point of the singularity?
Well, this is well known.
Yeah.
This is, I mean.
Do you?
you a question. Let me ask.
Do you? No. Do you know? You don't know what physics was like either, right? Do ya? Billions and billions of years ago, at the point of the singularity, do you know what physics was like in reality at that point in time?
Well, physics. If you're talking about our known physics.
No. That's not what I said. I said billions and billions and billions and billions of years ago, like at the point of the singularity.
Yeah, but
You're no, because you're saying it defies physics, but you're also saying none of us know what physics was like. So what's it defying? It's defying what?
okay. Well, first off, that singularity, whatever you want to call it, and all that stuff came out of the invisible. Okay?
Oh, God almighty. It came out of the invisible. David needs to shut up and go, I think, because... And they need to put him out of his misery here, because as he goes on, if any scientists are watching this, in particular, if any physicists are watching this, they will be cringing so much. And I can't keep saying the same thing, because that's going to get tedious as well. And for the small number of people that are watching it, and also the fairly reasonable number of students, my students next week that will be watching this, I don't want to keep saying the same thing. Poor old David.
You want to call it? And all that stuff came out of the invisible. Okay, we know that for a fact.
Oh, we know it for a fact. Oh, for goodness sake, we know it for a fact. I just do not know how to respond to that. David doesn't know anything for a fact, I suspect.
What?
No. What do you mean came out of the invisible?
Yes,
What does that even mean?
Sure, they did.
Visible light spectrum?
Well,
The invisible.
no, it's invisible because do you look in the air and do you see the nitrogen and the helium and the oxygen?
Not with my eyes. They're not good enough to. No, not with eyeballs.
Well, we can use instruments just to measure them.
Yeah.
You couldn't.
That's how we know they exist, because we can detect them.
It came out.
They're detectable.
It came out of a realm that was totally invisible. All I'm saying, let me ask you a question. If you took,
So you just said nitrogen is invisible. So you're saying that the singularity came out of nitrogen? Like, I don't know what you mean even at this point, David. Like, I don't know what you mean.
there was no matter. That's what I'm trying to say.
But
You know that.
you don't. It was a
Matter.
We don't know if there was no. So there was energy, and energy and matter are basically the same thing. So I'm not. Well, wow, that was a huge gloss over some complicated physics.
Jim,
but
there's a huge amount of physics in that statement.
This is the problem, right? We don't know what happened, and you're saying I don't know, therefore pantheism, and that's just an argument from ignorance, and that's not a good place to argue. You just stop with I don't know.
right.
You asked me a question, and did I know that physics, what it was like in the beginning? And I'm trying to say that if there is no matter, there's no physics. See?
Oh gosh, he just
It's
simply
all
does not know what the hell he's talking about.
But that's an assertion that there's no matter.
Right. You're still making an assertion that we don't know if that's the
Or
case.
energy.
You know what the physics are here and now, but you don't know what the physics like were then. Or
Okay.
history.
David,
We do not know what
I
the
need.
physics
Okay,
are before
this.
blank time. That is correct. David.
Had
I'm
enough.
done because
Okay.
that's not done with the. I am done talking. What this boils down to is you do not know how the universe began. There's multiple theories about it. One you're tangentially familiar with, and you feel as though your understanding of the one that you're tangentially familiar with somehow entails pantheism because something had to be created, and therefore if anything's created, it needs to entail pantheism. I guess that's what I gleaned from this. And also,
Well, yeah, it happened.
it seems to be predicated on you having a series of assertions that indicate that you have a basic misunderstanding of both physics, the theories of how the universe started as they relate to physics, and possibly even pantheism.
Well, he's not going to agree to
All
that,
I'm
is
basing it on is the ability for the cosmos that their claim. It's just following kind of liberal Christianity, really, because it followed George's Lemaitre false prophecy about expansion, or from the Bible about God stretched out the heavens. But
Oh God.
My claim was that the cosmos is, they claim from the redshift, and I don't know how they use the redshift for expansion because that don't make any sense.
Oh, okay. So there you go. We don't know about the expansion because what? From the redshift? Because that doesn't make sense. Let's just hear that again, because that is like words of wisdom from David.
It's came from the redshift, and I know from the Bible about, you know, God stretched out the heavens. But
wait for it.
My claim was that the cosmos is, they claim from the redshift, and I don't know how they use the redshift for expansion because that don't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense for redshift to indicate an expansion. Well, that suggests that David does not understand redshift and does not understand what causes it and what it tells us. Redshift is when you look at the light from an object and you have to know what wavelength or frequency that light is, or what wavelengths and frequencies that light has. And then when you actually measure it, you see that the actual wavelengths or frequencies are bigger or smaller than you expect them to be. If the wavelength is bigger than you think it should be, we call that redshift. It doesn't mean the light becomes red. It means the wavelength is bigger than it should be. If it's smaller, we call it blue shift. If it's bigger, redshift, that means that the object giving out that light is moving away from us. And if it's blue shifted, that means the object that's giving out the light is moving towards us. And obviously that's not the whole of the physics behind the explanation of it, but that's basically what it means. Unfortunately, David is making more and more of a fool of himself. And yeah, he kind of needs to move on, I think.
My claim was that the cosmos is, they claim
here we go,
from the
David.
redshift, and I don't know
Say
how they
it once
use the
more with
redshift for
feeling.
expansion because that don't make any sense. Because space, according to CMDR, space is not expanding, but if it were...
God. Okay,
David, I'm going to stop you and I'm going to let you go because I can't take physics lessons from physics and cosmology lessons and astrophysics lessons from you right now, David, because you say the words I don't understand multiple times while you're making your assertions. And I just want you to roll around in your head that if you have to say the words I don't know and I don't understand that many times while you're stringing together a theory that you're presenting, that's not a strong argument, right? If you say, I don't know, I don't understand, none of us know, I don't have an idea, this is the only one I'm familiar with, I only have a tangential familiarity with it.
I don't know. I did not say I don't know. You're the one that doesn't know. I know what I'm talking about.
No, you literally said the words, I don't know why they... Okay, David?
You're unaware of all of the different theories in cosmology. You have your own cosmology and you're not a cosmologist.
David?
How old was Einstein when he came up with the theory of relativity?
That's inconsequential. He could have been 15 or he could have been 130. It's inconsequential how old he is, because if you're attempting to relate cognitive ability and intellect with age, that it's not relevant. It has nothing to do. It supports none of the things that you've said. It's not relevant.
And he was wrong about...
Because I'm not a scientist, that I am not qualified.
Yeah, indeed. That's it.
No, it's because you actually say multiple times, you don't know, you don't know, you don't know, you don't know. Now, you are in fact not qualified. That's just a fact of the matter. That's just how qualification works, David. I'm also not qualified. That is literally how qualification works. Neither of us are astrophysicists. So by definition, we are not qualified. We're not. We're just having a conversation about it. Both of us, both you and I are. The only difference between you and me I am saying that there is no God, and Big Bang cosmology, whatever that may be, doesn't even necessarily have a relation to it. You're saying it does have a relation to it, and going on to make multiple assertions that you've already explicitly stated you don't know how to support. And you're getting frustrated with me because I'm not going to accept your unfounded assertions? Because I'm not. I'm just not. Nobody should, because that's not the way that things should work when it comes to making beliefs and acquiring knowledge. Accepting David's unfounded assertions about cosmology when he's not qualified is not the way that people should go about accumulating knowledge on the universe. So I'm not going to today or ever.
I'm perfectly qualified.
You're perfectly qualified to talk about quantum physics, cosmology.
See, David is just digging. You see, I mean,
know what
it's
I'm talking about.
How, David?
I'm just telling you, space cannot expand. Look, it can
David.
expand into a solid
he
material.
just doesn't know what he's
Prove it.
talking about.
God
What's your
damn it.
proof? Give me your evidence. Give me
Oh, my
give
God.
your model for how it works.
Can space
Oh.
expand into a solid material?
Oh!
Apparently it does, because that's what's happening, right?
No. That's
David, David,
David, when you prove your theory and get your Nobel Prize, call us back. Until then, go open a book, go study some cosmology and have some fun with that. Because you clearly don't know what you're talking about. I barely do, and have only a layman's understanding of it. So, you just need to really educate. Go listen to Sean Carroll and some of the other cosmologists that are out there, and actually get some education on that, because you're less qualified than I am, and that is saying something, because I am not qualified either. So anyway, thank you. Hope that helps. Have a nice day.
No, he hung up on us.
Oh, yay, good.
Okay, I'd like to say something about David, but what I actually want to say would not be appropriate, so I'm not going to say that. However, what I am going to do is just give you a brief glimpse here of something that you might want to look at. This is YouTube, Sean Carroll, Kalam Cosmological Argument. This is just one example. This is Sean Carroll. This is Sean Carroll. This is William Lane Craig, and there he is there. And they have an argument here, or a debate, I should say, about the Kalam cosmological argument. Now, William Lane Craig, who's a Christian, is a philosopher who knows bugger all about physics, but thinks that he does. He's, in my personal view, he's got a massively overinflated opinion of himself. And he's one of these people that steps out of his area of expertise and tries to tell us, and we should be cautious. However, Sean Carroll, who we are all prone to doing this, however, Sean Carroll is actually a theoretical cosmologist. So he does know what he's talking about when it comes to the cosmological argument. And if you, now this is a shortened version, the actual debate, which I think is not here. Oh, there you go, 2 hours 16, it's there. The actual debate is much longer, and if you find that you're kind of invested in this sort of thing, and you want to listen to it, then it's a really interesting debate. I would basically listen to the introductions and then listen to Sean Carroll, and don't listen too much to William Lane Craig, because he doesn't know what he's talking about. But the rebuttals from Sean Carroll are really interesting, where at one point Lane Craig refers to a particular physicist making some statement, and then Sean Carroll points out to him, no, he doesn't make that, and here's a video of him explicitly stating not that. It's really good, and the debate is a glowing example of what I was saying at the beginning. Specialisms carry with them a weight with your words, and I'm afraid that if you don't have the specialism, you should be careful about what you say.
He had enough of our foolishness. We were being qualified.
Yeah.
Drinking out of his qualified, but okay, let's go. We're going to talk to Kenny.
Kenny. Hello, Kenny.
Hi, Kenny. You're talking to Jim and Matt.
How are you?
So good.
Good afternoon.
Great day.
Thank you for putting me on.
Thank you for calling.
Yeah.
What would you like to talk about today?
All right. Well, when I told the call screener, first of all, I just want to find out, is the call screener one of your tech people?
What?
No, I don't know who screened you, so I don't know.
Oh, okay.
We can't see.
Well, anyway, I just want to put kudos out for the tech people if it was, because there's a female voice and only one female tech person, so I thought I knew who I was talking to. But anyway, the people you don't talk a lot about are the people that screen the calls, and I think the people who screen the calls do a real good job.
You're absolutely right.
We
And if you
agree
feel as though
completely.
Yeah, if you feel as though we don't talk about them enough, that's something that we should take on board. We call everybody out, all of the volunteers at the beginning, including the call screeners. But you're absolutely right; they are tireless, and all of our volunteers are amazing. And I say that because Jim and I are also volunteers, and I think that we're amazing too. So, go ahead, Kenny.
Well,
Kenny.
I'm real happy. This is the first time I think I've called in that you two are on the show, either one of you, and so
that's pretty. Well, it's not my first time on the show. It's our first time together.
Okay. And well, I agree with you, Jim, that all software and hardware sucks. If you actually did say that,
all software sucks. All hardware sucks. People make mistakes. Is the entire phrase that I use. Yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that's true. Well, I'm going to try to make as few mistakes as I can on this. I ran across something kind of accidental, like it seems like everything that exists, its opposite also exists.
What?
Would you agree with that?
Well, let me ask you this question. What's the opposite of my glasses? These exist. What's the opposite of them?
Right.
The opposite of your glasses?
They exist.
Well, I'd have to look it up in the dictionary. The opposite of the glasses you wear, I'd have to look it up because this could be very tricky sometimes.
What?
Well, so if you're simply going with semantics, I'm not going to accept that as definitions as evidence.
Okay,
Yeah.
So if matter exists, you don't necessarily think it follows that antimatter must exist.
No, antimatter exists.
Not without evidence, no.
But
There is evidence that
exists.
antimatter exists.
Whoa, okay. Antimatter exists, but I don't know whether... Because Kenny's not giving a definition here of what he means. And I'm not sure that he means antimatter in the way that a physicist talks about antimatter. But we'll see in a moment, maybe.
Without evidence, no.
No, we have evidence.
There is evidence that
exists.
antimatter exists, but...
Well, I thought it was kind of universally accepted that if something exists, its opposite always exists. I just thought that was...
Well, define the word its opposite.
I think so.
Well, I think you're having a little bit of problem with language, because when you say anything, and I point out my glasses, you said you'd have to go look at a dictionary to find out what the opposite of glasses were. But that is simply
Will a dictionary
word
tell you?
definitions. That's not really evidence of anything
The
physical.
opposite of
So
spectacles?
if we do know that antimatter exists, and it seems like it should be the case, if I understand the science correctly, and I may not, that antimatter should also exist. And there's kind of some confusion as to why there isn't as much matter and antimatter in the universe.
There isn't
But
so much
that is
antimatter.
not the same thing as everything that exists has something that's opposite of it, right?
Right. Well,
Okay.
what would you two define? Thank you. I appreciate that. What would you guys define as a coherent definition? What do you mean by a coherent definition? You don't mean universally accepted. You mean something else, don't you?
One that agrees with what we experience
so
in reality.
there's different ways that
what
we can use
measure.
the word everything.
Evidence.
And you can use the word everything to mean glasses, or you could use everything to mean matter, which glasses are made of, and antimatter. So that's why I'm somebody could think that your definitions are a little off, or the way that you're using words is a little off. And we just need to make sure that we all understand what you're talking about when you say everything that exists has something that is opposite. If what you mean is matter, then we can say if matter exists, then antimatter also exists. And that's fine, but we should say that instead of everything, because everything, that just gets me back to my glasses example again, right? So we just need to make sure that we're all using the language the same way.
Do you believe that there's a possibility of a good case for an opposite of the universe existing, or the opposite of cosmos existing?
I don't know. I know there are people who postulate that multiverse theory. I am not exactly up on that.
No, I don't think that's what.
But yeah, I mean, it's possible.
If I were to define God as the only thing created and everything else, God is the only thing that's uncreated and everything else is created, would everything else compose the cosmos?
I don't know. You're making the definitions.
And I don't see the connection. On like, are you saying like, would God have an opposite too? Like, what would that be? What's anti-God?
Do you have any? Do you have a word that describes everything that does exist?
The universe.
Yeah, potentially the universe. Okay. Well, what about the cosmos? Isn't that an extension of the universe that may include multiverses or whatever that might have caused?
Yes, that is correct. Yes. Yes.
Okay. So cosmos, if that's the sum total of that which exists, then I can define God as, if I define that as created, I can define God as the uncreated, and we've got some sort of definition of God, don't we?
Oh, I think I see what you're saying. I get what you're angling at. You're just saying that you're setting out the groundwork by saying if everything that does exist has an opposite, like you want us to agree to that premise, and then once we agree to that premise, you can parlay from that premise to say, well, the universe encompasses everything, so that is everything that exists. Right. So you define it as created, but then what's the opposite of created?
Uncreated.
So God's uncreated. So that's what you're thinking, is that God's uncreated, but also everything that exists. So I guess I could use your same line of argumentation and say that the opposite of that is doesn't exist.
Non-existence or non-being, I guess, would be
non-existence. Everything that exists, if there has to be an opposite, then the opposite of that would be doesn't exist. Right. So following your own line of logic, saying I accept it, I'm not sure that I do, because I'm not sure it's parsed out fully well. But even if I did accept it, it doesn't follow that it would necessarily lead to a God. It could actually necessarily lead to the opposite. Just depending on how you use language.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, everything that exists, there needs to be an opposite of existing, and that's what? Non-existence.
Right.
But it's all in how you define it. It's semantics. So if you define it as created, then the opposite of that is uncreated, right? But first you have to define it as created. We don't have any proof that it's created. You need the assertion that it's created in order to even get there. We don't need that assertion, though. One thing we do know for sure is that it exists. So what's the opposite? No, because the only thing that we know for certain is that it exists. That's the only thing we know for certain. We need to insert your assertion that it was created in order to get to the opposite. So without inserting your assertion, the only thing that we know for certain is that it exists. So if we accept your premises, the exact opposite, the antithesis of that is non-existent. So following your line of logic, God can't exist unless you insert an assertion that the universe itself was already created, which is a presupposition for God. So you're actually making the question by even making the argument to begin with, and the rest of it is just kind of a song and dance.
Excellent. I get it. Yeah. Now,
come on.
I was trying to remember what my next point was going to be.
Well, you wrote
I'm a nightmare for that.
Kenny.
I ruin everything.
Yeah, but it that doesn't mean it's not fruitless to listen to you. Let's see.
Oh, it might be.
Well, I want to discuss
the opposite of me is delightful.
That's not true. Sorry. That's not true, Shannon. All right. So, Kenny, what was your point?
Okay. Anyway, I wanted to try to discuss something more on a spiritual level or spirit level or God level, and try to get a ground where we could agree with as to discuss it. I actually wasn't trying to do a gotcha premise. I was trying to open a door. What I've been trying to do since I've been calling on this show, I guess 3 or 4 times in the past 5 episodes, is trying to establish the possibility that actually a strong possibility that spirit or spiritual is something that's real, that exists, because we humans are, so many of us are engaging in that which we would call spiritual or spirit. And, the majority of the people in the world are spiritual in the sense that they transcend themselves to find meaning and purpose in life.
What does that mean?
Can I interrupt you for real quick? So what do you mean by spirit and spiritual, and what does it mean to transcend oneself? So you can pick any one of those 3. I would like to start with spirit and spiritual, but that's okay.
Okay, well, if I'm imagining a pond with streams, and most of the time when with ripples in it, a calm pond with ripples in it. That's obviously something I've seen before, you know, because we don't usually have these images in our head that we've, unless we have seen something very similar. But you imagine that, but your imagination of that is not necessarily, it's not something that's immaterial that doesn't exist because it's in your memory, but it's outside of yourself. And so you develop a sense of calmness by meditating on that pond with ripples. So it's a real pond with ripples. It affects you spiritually. It might even, if you're a tree hugger and trees excite you or birds or something, you might even have an oxytocin experience. So what I'm saying is that when we can trigger all this stuff, and we can have what people usually call a spiritual experience by going outside or transcending ourselves rather than.
I don't know what outside or transcending myself means, though. I mean, outside of myself.
Then things going outside yourself. I mean, do you ever think about something outside yourself? I mean,
you're talking about proximal and distal stimuli.
Yeah. I think about the computer in front of me. That's outside myself. My cell phone's outside myself. So again, I didn't know what you mean by outside myself.
Okay. You operate computers, right?
Yeah, sure do.
Okay. You operate computers. You're in the computer business or the computer field or something, and you operate computers. Does that give you any fulfillment in life, being involved in that career or that thing that you're involved in?
Yeah, I enjoy it. Yes.
Okay, spiritual to me isn't a mystical upper story thing that I just can't get. What spiritual is just something that it can be anything outside of myself. You can be spiritual about anything outside of it.
I don't get outside of. How's my enjoyment outside of myself? Shane's going to explode here in just a second.
I don't believe for a second that anything spiritual to me is purely outside of myself, and that I don't have an imminent experience with it if it's meaningful to me at all.
Shannon,
it's subjective and objective.
Looks like
I
she's
think
going
all
to explode.
reality is always objective and subjective if it's real to me.
You're talking about the connection between imagination and emotion.
Okay, Shannon, go ahead. Go ahead. You're about to explode, and I was going to run an experiment to see how long it would take before you did, but I can't do that.
The answer is now. The answer is now. Okay, so you're talking about you talked about how internal images are constructed, right? So when you're talking about how internal images are constructed, you reference that you need to have some sort of experience, but we can actually use our imagination to create like aggregates. Things like chimera, for example, are aggregates of previous experience, and we can use what we know about perception to create whole cloth new things like that. That's why fantasy exists, right? That's why like creatures that exist in our imagination don't exist in real life, is because we have imaginative capabilities, but usually they have some sort of attributes that relate to things that we know, right? So you don't actually have to recall one-to-one something that you've experienced, like when you're thinking about your stream. And in fact, when you're thinking about your stream, your reconstruction of that stream also isn't one-to-one. So you've had an emotional connection to something that you find calming or soothing. And when you recall that, you reinstitute that emotional experience by virtue of the recall. And when you enter into a meditative state, you're again placing yourself in that experience via your memory, which activates your emotional centers, which if you have a priming mechanism like spiritual experience to relate to that emotional state, then you will relate that emotional state cognitively to a spiritual experience. If you don't have that as a prime, so if you don't relate these sort of meditative states that bring you happiness or contentment or calm to spiritual experiences, you will almost indefinitely relate it to something else. You'll just relate it to the emotional state itself. You'll attempt to elicit it for the sake of the emotional state. But if you have the additional level of priming and framing that relates it to that spiritual experience, then you'll make that connection. So just saying that people have spiritual experiences is really only evidence that people who are primed to affiliate emotional states with spirituality will affiliate emotional states with spirituality, and that would be anticipated and expected. Okay, I'm done now. You can go back. I'm so
okay. Well,
sorry.
I saw how excited you were before you got a chance to talk.
I almost hyperventilated.
silent movie in front of me while I'm watching, but there's a delay, and so I'm seeing you clicking your nails and everything, going, boy, I wish you'd be quiet because I really want to interject right here.
I did. It was so good. Sorry, but go ahead. Go ahead.
But
I just don't think that you could you can't relate that directly to, you can't say because people have spiritual experiences and it happens en masse, that means that there's some sort of God. Because en masse, like most of the population has some sort of religious affiliation just by virtue of like where they're born, how they're brought up, and to a certain degree, the way that humans anthropomorphize things and look for answers and are pattern recognition machines. So it would go without saying that people who are born in spiritual environments, who are primed to interpret experiences as spiritual, who are told that a God exists, would relate emotional experiences to spirituality given the opportunity when they're told that that's going to be the case. That doesn't prove God exists. That just proves that humanity has built this infrastructure of cognitive bias that teaches us how to make relations when we're having experiences. So it's not really proof for anything except for what we learn, how we operate as a species, and the fact that it's predicated under and couched within societal standards and interaction standards, and that's basically it. It leads to nothing else to me except for an outcome that would be anticipated, especially since once people leave religion, like I've left religion, for example, I still have those contemplative experiences, but they're no longer registered as spiritual because now I've deconstructed that priming. So now I have the same sort of experiences, except for I have this experiences for their own sake, as opposed to having those experiences and feeling as though I need some sort of external source to give me those experiences, or that they're somehow related to some sort of external force. Instead, now I have the control over knowing how to elicit them. And I do it of my own accord for my own reasons, and that's actually a better way to enter meditative states, because if you're anticipating that it might be spiritual, for example, and then you don't have something that you would relate to cognitively as a spiritual experience, that's ultimately potentially detrimental. Like there's lots of ways you could talk about this, but you can't just assert it as, well, people have experiences and they describe them as spiritual, thus God, because people also attribute them to myriad gods. Which one?
Okay. Well, maybe you can help me understand an experience I have, but it's very brief. It's not a real complicated one or anything.
2 minutes.
Hang on.
We gotta go.
Here it is. I'm Eastern Orthodox. We have a thing called chrismation, and it's not a separate sacrament or mystery of our church like it is in the Roman Catholic Church that differentiate everything because they're Western and we're very Eastern. And when you're chrismated, you're anointed with oil, and it's following the stuff in James 2:7 and 1 John 2:27 that you're anointed, that no man outside the faith can teach you the faith or whatever, that you've got a spiritual illumination that has confirmed it in you, and it goes along with being sealed by the church in the Holy Spirit. We actually have a during that chrismation, the church pronounces sealed. Everyone says sealed each time we're anointed with oil on our eyes or ears and everything, and sealed, our body sealed. But get that out of the way. I'm talking too much about that. My point I want to make is that there's a book called The Way of Orthodoxy that I did not understand on Saturday prior to my chrismation. I was chrismated, I believe, the 15th of September 2011 on Sunday, the Sunday of Elevation of the Cross. And when I was chrismated that Sunday, the very next day when I picked up that book, I really got it.
Did somebody tell you that you wouldn't get it until after your chrismation? Right. Did somebody tell you that you wouldn't understand it until after your chrismation?
Oh, gosh, no, absolutely not. The book was never discussed.
It wouldn't necessarily matter either. It could be you internally having some sort of epiphany related to your affiliation with the chrismation, because it sounds like there was a lot of priming behaviors and rituals involved as well. Like you said, there was anointing, and then there was repetitive call and response. Anointing and repetitive call and response are group activities that are used to put people into like sort of like trance or meditative states. And if this was something that you felt would be a spiritual awakening, you affiliated with a spiritual awakening, you were going through the rituals related to it, your understanding of the book may have been, relatively similar to what it was before. However, now the scaffolding for your schema related to that book was imbued with your perception of your new spiritual endowment. And by virtue of your perception that you had a new spiritual endowment, you alter your perception of how you see the book. So now when you view the book, you view it through the lens of assumption that you now have a form of spiritual endowment that you didn't have prior. And by virtue of you having that assumption about yourself, you see the book differently and relate to it differently because you were primed to.
Okay, so you're saying could have been primed to have more confidence in my ability to understand the book?
You were primed to, definitely you were primed to think that you were having a spiritual awakening. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you deny that?
Told before that. I was definitely told before that this is an illumination, but I wasn't told that I would necessarily, I was specifically told, you may, don't expect warm and fuzzies. You may not feel any different afterwards.
Yeah.
But I
so that they can couch disappointment so that people don't slide back if they don't have the affirmation. Okay. You gave yourself an affirmation potentially, Kenny.
Okay.
And then you looked at that circularly as proof. You gave yourself affirmation and then said, me having a different perspective on something after having an experience that I was told was likely going to give me a different perspective. It isn't I can see why it would be compelling. I can certainly see why it would be compelling, especially since it is personal and it happened to you. But from an external perspective, I can make sense of it very easily without the awakening actually doing anything aside from putting you in a different psychological state than you were prior and looking to potentially fulfill that psychological state, even unconsciously, or relating to things that had to do with your religion differently as a result of you seeing yourself as imbued with this religious and spiritual awakening that you were anticipating.
Is it possible that I became more spiritual as a result of this, as we define it in the Orthodox Church?
It's possible that you perceive yourself as more spiritual. Absolutely. Of course it is.
No. Well, I mean, I actually understood things in the church a lot better. There's definitely, because it's Eastern, I'm a very Western, intellectual, scientific kind of guy. I love philosophy and stuff. Mm-hmm. I've gone into, to be totally transparent to you, I've been a martial artist, and I really do understand Far Eastern religions and philosophy and stuff.
Well,
but that's not the Near Eastern Christianity of Antioch, Syria, and Jerusalem. I mean, this is definitely a different critter than what the Roman Church puts out.
Right.
We believe that
but Kenny, I just want to stop you for 1 second. We do have to go, but I want to put a bug in your ear before you go. I have heard this myriad times, not about your religion, but others, because other people had similar sort of awakenings that resulted in them approaching their relationship or understanding of their religion differently, but they were different religions. Are their experiences that mirror yours, are they false and only yours is true? Or is it possible that they're all cognitively explainable and that because yours happened to you, it's personal, so you're more invested in trying to justify it?
Well, I don't think necessarily that another enlightening experience or nirvana type thing or anything like that of another religion would help them understand an Orthodox book.
No. Help them understand their religions.
I believe I believe that it's an Orthodox experience that helped me understand an Orthodox thing.
Okay. I am going to let you go because I'm not certain you fully understood my question. But I'll let you listen back to it, and we are over time at this point. And I appreciate your call. You were lovely to talk to. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. I like Kenny.
Yeah.
All right. We've come to an end.
We have. Another good show.
Did you have
fun?
fun?
Thank you so much.
I had fun.
Yeah, lots of fun, always.
Yeah, I want to believe you. I really do.
Yeah, well, and I apologize for experimenting with you to see how long it would take before your head exploded, but
Oh, you didn't even get a chance to experiment. As soon as he said conscious experience, I was like,
yeah, exactly. I was going to see how long it would take, and then I was like, no, I can't do that to Shannon. Paul would kill me if your head exploded. So
That's right. That's right. He would move here for nothing if my head had exploded by the time I got it. Well, thank you to all of the callers today. I had a great time. Everybody, make sure that you go check out all the links in the description.
Yeah, and I'm going to stop there because they're about to hit the music, and every time the music starts, it gives me a copyright issue. So I'm just going to stop it before it gets there. Can I say it's really late in the UK? It's 37 minutes past midnight. So I need to end this. But for all the ones that did jump in, thank you. I really appreciate it. And for any of my students that will be watching it over the next week to 10 days, thank you guys, for the genderless guys, of course, for watching it, and look at the arguments that are used here, and think about when it's to do with science, think about the science. Remember, be good. Look after yourselves, make sure you sleep well, especially sleep well, eat and drink well, and if you get an opportunity to get vaccinated, then please get vaccinated. Do not believe any of this rubbish that vaccinations are like, bad for you. The only time someone should not get vaccinated is on medical health advice. If there's no medical reason why you shouldn't be vaccinated, then you should be getting vaccinated. It's really important, and following whatever procedures your local medics will be telling you on, period between the first and the second, all that kind of jazz. So be good, stay safe, and I hope to see you soon. Have a good week.